Welcome back, everyone. My name is Sam.
And I'm Melissa.
I grew up in the FLDS community. It is a polygamous group run by Warren Jeffs, and I moved out when I was 18 years old.
I was raised LDS. Sam and I have been married for 9 years and have 2 awesome kiddos.
Yes, we do. We want to quickly thank our donors, YouTube members, and our patrons over on Patreon. We really do appreciate your support.
Yes, we do. Today we have had a few people reach out and want us to react to the Brethren Church. I have never heard of them. So going into this video, we found a video on YouTube that talks about some people who have left the church and their experiences in the church. And so we thought it would be fun to compare our experiences in and out and after in our own church experiences in the FLDS and LDS to the people who have been raised and left the Brethren Church.
Yes, we've heard of the Brethren Church because of you all, so thank you for this. But we don't know much about them at all.
No, I had never heard about them until people were commenting about it. Had you ever heard of them?
Nope. Well, maybe heard of them, but I've never looked into them.
Yeah.
So anyway, we're excited to kind of have a first view of this with you because we will be reacting live here and share our experiences. And I have a feeling that because so many churches have a lot of similarities that even some that you wouldn't assume do, I have a feeling they will also have a lot of similarities with the FLDS and the LDS church.
Because we're all more alike than what people think.
That's very true. Yep.
So here we go.
Growing up, we didn't have friends outside the church. We didn't have pets. We didn't have TV. We didn't have computer until much more recent times. We didn't have technology in general. I wasn't allowed to go to the cinemas.
Okay, sorry. We're like, 25 seconds in?
Well, there you
does that
go.
sound familiar, babe?
Yes, that is exactly how I was in the FLDS. So the technology, we had technology when it comes to, nice vehicles, and we did have cell phones, but nothing fancy. But yes, the internet, the entertainment, the movies, the TV, that kind of thing, sounds just exactly the way I was raised.
I grew up in a group known as the Exclusive Brethren, presently known as the Plymouth Brethren Christian Church, from birth until I was 22.
No means to demean Dad, but he said, I'd rather see you dead and in a coffin, having a brethren burial, than leave the church and go out into the world. And I've sort of thought about that for years. That's a really harsh thing to say. You'd actually prefer your oldest kid to be dead in a coffin in the ground. But then, in his context, he was effectively losing me. He felt he was going to lose me anyway.
Oh man, that coffin, I thought that was exclusive to Mormonism. I didn't realize that there were other churches out there that used that same example. In the mainstream LDS church, it was that it would be better for you to be dead than to lose your purity, right?
Right.
I think was the general conference talk. Maybe I'll look up that quote and put it up here. But basically, yeah, it'd be better than for you to lose your purity. It'd be better for you to be dead. And then within the FLDS,
in fact, this what he said, I heard in the FLDS church exactly. That it would be better that you die than to, and this was after an incident that a lot of us almost did die because of a really bad accident we were in. And even after that, those words were said. It would be better that you die than to ever leave this church. And yes, it hits very strangely when you hear those words. When I was in the FLDS, it didn't bother me that much because I understood. I was in the middle of it, and I understood the way that the FLDS people would talk about those apostates or those that have left the church. And it was always that they are worse off than if they had died. So it wasn't surprising, but now that I've been away from it for many years and looking back and realizing, wow, your parent would say that.
Yeah.
It just makes me a little bit sick inside to know that they would rather their child, and because I have left, now looking back, that's saying, okay, they would have rathered that I die than that.
For you to be who you are right now.
Then exactly. But to his point that he just mentioned here as well, they feel like they're losing you anyway.
Well, and not only that, but I know I was taught that like a spiritual death is way worse than a physical death. Because spiritually, like your spirit's going to continue on after this life, right? So if you die physically, there's still an eternity to live for. But if you die spiritually, there's an eternity of unhappiness. There's an eternity of, well, depending on what religion, right? An eternity of torture, eternity of prison, eternity of unhappiness, being separated from your family within Mormonism, right? Like you're separated from your family if you're not sealed to them for eternity. So separation, isolation, all those type of things. And they're like, that's way worse than someone's physical body dying right now.
Right. And in some cases, they would say, in the FLDS, I know anyway, that a spiritual death means that you would actually die. You would just poof into nothingness as though you were never in existence, basically. So that's also taught in some cases.
Yeah, intense. Oh. 8,000. That's similar to the numbers of the FLDS at their height. So that's pretty a similar
it said
group
New
size.
Zealand, right? 8,000 in New Zealand.
Yeah.
So but they have others elsewhere, don't they?
I think New Zealand's their hub.
Okay.
And that's what they're talking about here. And leaving, being traumatic, being cut off. Isn't Gloria Vale that we did video on? They were also New Zealand, right?
Yes.
Okay, yeah. So a lot of more intense Christian groups in New Zealand than what I knew.
Fundamentalist, yes.
I know a number of families who have been ripped apart.
You work with them, you live with them, you go to school with them, you go to church with them, and you socialize with them. You could live up the road from them, but your culture might as well be from the other side of the planet.
I know we're stopping at like every 20 seconds so far, but
it's just crazy because in my mind, the FLDS was this very unique and one and only kind of church. And yes, very different from the rest of the world, very, very different. But that was taught as a special thing, as a good thing. I never would have guessed that so many other groups out there, religious groups, are in some ways the exact same as the FLDS.
Yeah.
It just, I would
You didn't know there was a group of 8,000 people in New Zealand having the same type of things?
Now, I understand that not everyone is Warren Jeffs. So I want to make that clear. I'm not comparing any other religion to Warren Jeffs. I'm just comparing it to the way that I was brought up, some of these intense teachings.
I grew up in the Exclusive Brethren Church, so was the first of 7 kids. Had a very sheltered life in Whangarei. Being raised in quite a sort of secluded or protected environment, while it has its drawbacks, it really meant that I had quite an idyllic upbringing. Like, it was just cruisy. It was just good. I didn't have to worry about stuff.
Sense of community, whilst in the community, is very strong. They're very tight-knit, but that was if you were actually fully inside the group.
Growing up in the Brethren is a very loving environment. It's very caring. So everything is there for you. There's a constant social circle. There's a network of friends and family. There are people who care about you.
Maybe that's something I should read for anybody who's listening on the podcast. It said the Plymouth Brethren believe the Holy Bible is the true word of God, and we believe we are each called upon to live a life in accordance with its instructions.
Yes. And just while we have this paused, once again, what he's saying here about having a good childhood, that's how I felt. Not everyone in the FLDS felt the same, but I felt that way, that I did have a good, close relationship with my friends and family and had a good childhood or a good upbringing. Considering the situation that I was in, it felt like it was a pretty good place to grow up.
Yeah. Growing up in Utah as someone who's LDS, I feel like you have, it's not as exclusive in the sense of being in your own separate community where it sounds like they are kind of like, keeping close together in the world around them is so different than them.
Right.
But, in Utah, you definitely feel that community. I felt like I had a great childhood, but it's true that everyone around me, like, went to the same church, right? So even within a neighborhood, there were multiple wards and congregations. So everyone around me, I would see every single Sunday, and every single kid in our neighborhood went to church. So you knew all the kids in your neighborhood. So there's definitely a lot of community when it comes to that, even if they're not like separated.
Right. Yeah. Yes, definitely more extreme depending on the group, but all with similar ideas that if you have everyone like-minded, doing the same thing, believing the same things, then it's easy to want to be together and separate from the world, I guess you could say.
Mm-hmm.
That's one of the hardest things about leaving a church like the Brethren, is that you go through that process, you know you're doing what's right, but also at the same time you know that you following what you believe is the right thing to do is going to cause unspeakable pain to a whole lot of people you care about. I mean, the thing that really sticks out is you don't realise fully until you leave that you have these gaping holes in your knowledge of how the world works.
Okay, so there's two big things there. Before we get into the knowledge, the idea that you're going to be causing an immense amount of pain to your family. And I think this is a common theme throughout a lot of religions. I guess probably just more high demand religions in particular. But depending on how religious anyone is, the more religious they are and the more faithful their family is to any church, the more it's going to hurt when people step away. So I'm sure a lot of our viewers can relate to this, that if you step away from the belief of your parents or your community, it's just so hard. But I know we've both experienced this, not only Sam with the FLDS, where he was actually physically completely removed and separated, but even within the LDS, the amount of, it's so hard that a spiritual decision that you make or that we made as a family could cause so much pain for other people. And it's absolutely heartbreaking, no matter how much you feel it's right for yourself.
It is, yes. The last thing you want to do is to hurt your family. And so it's sad that if someone has a different perspective, a different view on a religious belief, then that can completely just disrupt the relationship. And yeah, I think that it's pretty common throughout the world, actually, especially in the high demand religions, that that happens. If you are raised a certain way and you're taught your entire life, this is the only way, this is God's way, and that's that, period. There's no other way, right? And then you reject that or you leave that, it causes a lot of grief and pain.
Yeah. And then, I mean, I'll let him get more into it, but even just him saying that you also feel a gap and this hole in your life as well, in the sense that you're giving up that community side,
right,
that you're raised with, right? So giving that up, I don't want to say giving that up, that's right, that's the wrong word, but even if you feel like it's right to step away from the religion, there's so much more than just the religious teachings and doctrines when you're stepping away from a community. And a lot of times you can't still reside in that community without their beliefs, because they don't really want outsiders or people who don't think like them, right? They want to be separate from the world and have only like-minded people. So if you no longer are like-minded to them, they don't really want you in that space. They want you to leave the community, whether it be physically or whether it be emotionally, or like they just, you're now like a danger to their system. Yeah,
well, and they don't want your opinion. If your opinion is different than theirs, because in their mind, their opinion is God's opinion. So if your opinion is different, then it must be worldly, from Satan, whatever you want to say, but they don't want that opinion there because that's just the way they think. And so especially in the FLDS, that's just, they don't even want us there physically because our appearance, our way of speaking, anything could disrupt their little bubble there, and it could possibly encourage others to leave, especially if we start saying things like, oh, it's not that bad out here. Whoa, don't go there, right? So that's just a big concern with these closed off communities.
And it's the smallest things, like not knowing how to eat in a restaurant. Like you don't know what the protocol is for ordering food or getting the waiter's attention because you've never eaten in a restaurant. Or not knowing how to use a TV remote, or things that you don't know that the news is on at 6 every night. there's a complete gap in terms of your knowledge of popular culture, because in terms of movies, TV shows, music and so on, you just haven't been exposed to it. Yeah, so your next door neighbours could be Brethren if you were living in a city where there was a Brethren church. So they're not isolated in the way that other church groups like Gloriavale are, where there's a completely separate commune. But I think with the Brethren, the barriers between them and other members of society are much more psychological. You know, they have this mindset that they're in the world but not of the world.
Oh, being in the world and not of the world was that's a very common LDS term, because we don't live in separate communities like Short Creek, right? And not only are we living among the rest of the world that we believe is, going downhill fast, but then we're also supposed to be sharing the gospel with all of these outside people. So within the mainstream LDS church, being able to be a missionary and reach out to those people, it's like this balance of, I have to make sure that I am perceived as a peculiar people that is different, so that I can stand out, so that I can share my values with other people and explain to them why I look different than everyone else, why I dress different, or why I talk differently, or, those are all missionary opportunities.
Right. Yes, and something he pointed out here as well was the difficulty once you do step away from these communities that keep you so sheltered, that you're not familiar with the outside world. And so to try to, I guess, live in the outside world, or to have a good life outside, there's just a lot of learning you have to do. I relate to him coming out and just not really understanding what everyone around me was talking about because of the different upbringing that I had. It took a lot of time to come around to understanding others.
Yeah, or even just, I think people don't realize the pop culture references on a regular basis that get used, right?
Oh,
people will quote Disney movies, or just keep swimming, just keep swimming. Little things like that people being raised in regular society are just automatically familiar with who Cinderella is and what this princess did, just normal stories and those type of things. That's so integrated that I think sometimes can make people, especially when they leave the FLDS, it can be a big learning curve to be able to understand all those little things that people say on a regular basis.
Yes. I tried so hard to fit in. I tried so hard that I think I came off as cocky because I pretended to know everything, because I was trying so hard to fit in and pretend that I knew things, and people would say something and everyone else was laughing and I would be like, yeah, so funny, and then go Google it later and what are they talking about. So that kind of thing is, I would say, pretty common amongst all of us that have left the FLDS and these other groups. It just takes a long time to catch up.
Yeah.
Just some of the little rituals and rules and just what they would have considered normal that we're just like, wow, that's so weird, that's so different. And you're sort of just asking 100 million questions, and new stuff comes up all the time, which is funny. We've been together nearly 4 years, and we'll get together with a group of others who have left the church as well, and then some little thing will come up and they're all cracking up laughing, and everyone in the room who's hadn't been in the church were like, we have no idea what's going on.
I remember neighbours doing things differently. It was the simple things. They sat in front of a telly and they watched their show. Didn't know what that meant. Hadn't heard of that term until hearing a neighbour say it one day. I talked to another neighbour about a show. Somebody hopping into their car and turning the radio on. That was foreign. We didn't have that growing up. And just watching people in social settings. Neighbours was definitely an opening point for me to realise that I was different, things were different. They didn't have large groups of people over to their homes. They had very little family to their home on a regular basis. They'd go out for a long time, never come home. That's when I thought, I wonder how are we different? Didn't really understand that, obviously. Started school, different again. The children were different. Even the way they spoke was different. Their families, seeing their parents was different, were different to mine. And that was obviously used to reinforce the fact that we were special because we were different. Mm-hmm. We used to have to wheel the TV into the class, and I was taken out of the class by the teacher by order of my parents. that we weren't allowed to watch the movie that was going on there. We weren't allowed to play the game on the computer when we first got computers in the class when I was about 6. That was new for everyone. Some of the kids had already obviously had it at home, didn't understand it, didn't get my head around it.
I think it's interesting that they do get to go to public school, though. That's a lot different.
Yes, that makes
than
it very
FLDS.
unique. That's something that we didn't deal with because home or schooling was at home, homeschool. So there wasn't anything going on in the school that wasn't approved by the church. So that would be unique. I do know that other fundamentalist Mormons like the Kingstons and the AUB, they have had similar experiences to that, where they did go to school in a public school system and then they just had to adjust to that and try to avoid some things like he's talking about.
Yeah, but the idea that they were supposed to be different, and that's something that I was definitely taught a lot, that we were supposed to be different and that was a good thing. So when
Right.
he mentioned that, I was like, absolutely.
Yeah.
Ruben really struggles with bring a plate type attitude that Kiwis sort of have. Like you go around to someone's for dinner and say, oh, can you bring a salad or can you bring a dessert or whatever it is, because that's just not something that would have been done. You know, you go to someone's house and they absolutely put it on. Like I remember him telling me the first one he went to when he came out of the church, someone said, I'll bring a plate, and he's like, what, do you not have enough crockery? Do you know, like what do you mean I have to bring food to your house? Like, is that a thing? So yeah, stuff like that.
It would be little tiny situations when you'd be like driving up and you just refuel the car and you'd be sitting in there with the rest of your family and just watching the other families go by, and okay, they look like a normal family and they look like a normal family, and looks like he's come back from sport or something like this. Like, they don't look that evil actually, and yet we're busy saying in the church that like these people are on the highway to hell sort of thing. Like, they don't look like that. They look happy. People in the world aren't happy. Well, they look really happy. Look at that family over there, like they're having a good old chuckle.
The idea of everybody else being unhappy.
That was 100% what we were taught. And that I had that exact same experience that he is talking about, where you would see other people, especially those that I had some kind of acquaintance with through work or other things, and in talking with them, realizing, wait a minute, these people seem like they're good, happy people. Why are we being taught that they're not? And so then you start wondering about that.
I'd say within the mainstream LDS, it wasn't whether or not people could be happy. I think sometimes it was referred to as they can be happy, but they'll never feel true joy without the gospel, meaning the gospel of Jesus Christ within the LDS church. You know, they'll never know true joy without the gospel. And that was a huge reason why we're supposed to share it, right? So yeah, they can be happy. They might think they're feeling happy, but they'll never be as happy as what they would be within our church. And so it was more surface level, like, oh yeah, you're happy. That's great for you. But not
It's
really.
only temporary. It's only temporary. If you want true joy that's everlasting, then join the church.
Yeah, exactly.
A while ago was like a Bambi reference. You know, like something about Bambi's mother being shot or something being the most traumatic thing of your childhood, and it's just like nothing. You know, hasn't seen it. Or like even like, you know, Run Forest Run or any of that real classic stuff. It's just like no.
Growing up, the outside world was portrayed in an extremely terrifying manner, really. A place where if I was to leave, I would be doomed to fail, doomed to not succeed at life, not be happy, not achieve my goals in life. I would encounter unfriendly people who would use me for what I had to offer and then move on to the next person. They were all tools of the devil, and that's where they were going. They were going to go to hell, and if you left and you were there with them, that's where you would go.
Now, yes, that is definitely the way I was raised as well. Wow, there are so many similarities here. It's crazy.
This is really, really similar.
It's crazy. But yes, the idea of if you ever leave, you're going to be miserable, you're going to fail, would scare us into staying. It was frightening. It was very frightening. And it wasn't until I was 18 years old and had quite a bit of experience with people on the outside that I realized that, you know what, I'm going to give this a try regardless.
Yeah, I remember being in one ward and talking to an older lady that had a child who left the LDS church. And I was asking, I think this was the same time, like I kind of had questions, but I was still fully, believing in the LDS church. And she was talking about her children. She had a son that had left. And, she was obviously very sad, very heartbroken that he left. And I was like, well, how is their family doing since leaving? And she was like, well, they seem really happy, but, that's super sad because I know they can't be. And I just remember that like sticking in my head so much because I thought, well, maybe if they look happy, they really are happy.
Yeah.
But again, I think it's that mentality of, yeah, you can't be happy if you leave and you go out into the big bad world.
Right.
And so it's definitely something that helps kind of create that fear of leaving. Like, okay, well, if I change my beliefs or if I go out there, I'm going to be miserable. And so I better just stay here. Even if I don't agree with everything, even if I don't think all of it's true, like it's safer here.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
And you're afraid that you would go out and be miserable and fail. And so it just makes more sense to stick it out. Right.
Yeah.
So
the show is now, I wanted to pause it too so we could read this again for anybody who's listening on the podcast. It says, for the Plymouth Brethren, family is central to our beliefs, the way of life. We enjoy time together just like other families around the world. Our children grow up loved, cherished, and are able to enjoy their childhood in a strong, caring community. I think both of the churches we grew up would say those exact words.
Definitely.
I had just over 3 hours notice to vacate the house of myself and all my possessions. We lived on the corner of a roundabout in a quiet suburb. I remember driving around that roundabout. My eyes didn't leave the house. The prospect for me was more not seeing them again, not seeing my mother again for a long time, not seeing my father, knowing that I was now the rejected person. The very first thing I did was I drove away from the home and I parked up in a car park lot. I ended up being taken in by somebody who just met me.
I literally went home after Mum came to work, went home, waited till she came to work, went home, got all my clothes, my piano, everything I could stuff in my car, took it around to my flat, dumped it off into my flat, went back to work as if nothing had happened. Felt a little bit sort of underhand, but probably the nicest way to go actually. Just not cause a scene, not cause a fuss, just wait till everybody's out of the situation, get my stuff, get it out, and then just not come back that night.
There was certainly one day where I knew that it was past the point of no return, and I knew that I was going to be excommunicated by the church, and so I was living in Invercargill, which is where I grew up. And so I spent a day driving around Invercargill saying goodbye to people like my grandma, my uncle, my auntie, my friends, and so on. And I knew absolutely when I was saying goodbye to those people that it was probably the last time I'd ever see them. And so there's quite a finality about that.
It's not like you decided to move away for a few months and then you'll go and talk to mum and dad later on and connect with your brothers or your sisters and your family in a few months' times. For a lot of people, this is goodbye forever.
Wow.
So them actually having to physically leave and know that they're saying goodbye forever is something that
it brings back memories. It brings back memories that once you decide. For me, it was to decide. For them, I don't know. It sounds like they were excommunicated. For a lot of other FLDS members as well, it was excommunicated or kicked out of the community. For me, I turned 18 years old and I decided I wanted a different lifestyle for myself. But still, because I made that decision, everything came to an end between me and my family. The relationship there, I was no longer welcome. I did have a chance to go back and get my things, but that was because it was so fresh that I had made the decision that my family tried to talk to me and talk me out of leaving. And so when I went back to get my things, they were hoping that there would be a chance that they could talk me out of it. And they didn't. So I just grabbed a few things that I could and left the big things behind. And I left. And it was very, very hard to know that by leaving, I was hopeful that I would see my family again, but there was no guarantee. There was no guarantee. And as it happens, over not a very long period of time, Warren Jeffs got more and more strict. And I haven't seen my mother in, I don't know exactly, but probably about 15 years at this point. Yeah. So it's very, very sad how strict that is when you choose to live a different lifestyle. You just have to cut all ties.
Yeah, I think it's interesting as well that like within these 3 stories, right, it shows that there's multiple ways to leave the community. You know, either being kicked out. The second guy was saying that he just didn't want to make a big deal of it and just kind of just left. Right. Basically. And the third guy going around trying to say goodbye to everyone, knowing that it was coming. And so I think it's just another testament that leaving groups like this, and especially ones where the community's close and you might never be allowed back, can also look so different, which is why we enjoy having people on that have left those communities and have interviews, because everybody's story is so different. Not only their childhood and their upbringing, even though it's within the same community, but also why they chose to leave. Yeah, it's crazy. Even like we see that all the time within the FLDS. Everybody had such a different experience, even though it was in this very small community. So
I was in my mid-teens when I realised something was different in a big way, that who I was didn't match the mould. When my sexuality came up as a topic of conversation with my priests, that one of them said to me, "Have you considered medication?" They believe that you've somehow chosen that path, that you have decided that you should become this and you're going to stick with it. I've been told to fight who I am as a person for the rest of my life, because God made me that way, and He made me that way to prove to Him that if I could fight it, then I'm worthy of, going into heaven, entering into heaven. I didn't walk away. The brethren walked away from me.
We get this question a lot, so this is probably a good opportunity to bring up if people had different sexual orientation in the FLDS, how were they treated? What did that look like?
So it was so clear that it was not welcome. It was not allowed ever. That if anyone had those feelings, they would choose to leave before saying anything to anyone. And I do know of a couple that that did have those types of feelings, and that they felt like something was wrong with them, and they chose to leave because they didn't want to deal with the community and how they would be treated in the community. So to just put it blunt, anyone that was gay or had anything that was not the norm in the religious eyes of the FLDS community, they were not allowed.
I just want to point out too, because when you just barely said, they felt like something was wrong with them, right?
Yep.
All of that feeling, when Sam says it, that's the religious pressure of what they were told those feelings were. So not that we're saying that it's wrong, but that in their church society, they're going to, all of these kids, if they start having any feelings outside of the norm, it's instantly they're going to feel guilt and shame and pressure that I'm wrong, something's wrong with me, what's wrong with me,
right? Instead
of even having any opportunity to explore or find out anything about those feelings.
Oh, 100%. It was just shut it down, turn it off. It's not welcome. And I imagine there are some FLDS people that went years.
Maybe their whole lives even.
Maybe their whole lives. It's not like they had any choice in who they were to marry anyway in the FLDS. The husbands and wives were put together by the prophet of the church. You will marry so-and-so, and in a lot of cases, they didn't even know each other. And so they would just bring them together and they would get married. So it wasn't uncommon for people to get married not by their own choice to whom they would marry. It would just be up to the church, and they would have to forget it unless they wanted to leave. That was their only other option.
Yeah.
And at that final stage, that was when I walked away from them full and complete.
I left the church. It was mostly because I was gay, and I could see that being gay in a group like the Exclusive Vision wasn't going to work in the long term. So I was sent to live in Sydney, which is where the world leader of the church lives. And while I was there, I was prescribed, I was sent to see a brethren doctor, Mark Craddock, and he prescribed me a hormonal suppressant, Cyprostat. And the basic effect of the drug is to cut off the supply of testosterone. And I think the thinking behind that was that if they couldn't immediately change my sexuality, they could at least remove my sexual feelings altogether.
Oh, sad. Craig was part of an Australian media investigation into the
wasn't
Brethren.
obliged to take it.
You recommended he took it though?
If he wanted to. It was it's his matter. He came to see me voluntarily.
Doctor, excuse me for saying this, but I don't know of any other medical practitioner that would recommend this.
I was aware of other people in the Brethren who had tried to suppress their sexuality and ended up getting married and having a family, and inevitably at some point in their life they would have a breakdown and come out as gay. And I just thought I was heading for an inevitable collision with the church, and to me it made sense to get it over and done with.
They believe this, they genuinely believe this, that people that leave to some degree are possessed or have some possession of evil.
It was not that I didn't dislike anybody, it wasn't that I actively disagreed with the church, I just felt that I could do better outside the church. I was too much of a free thinker to actually go along with some of their concepts, and that's all it was. And my sister, who used to be really good mates with my second sister, comes in and she gave me a big hug, and she was just in tears, like she was just beside herself, and she just said to me, the devil's got you, the devil's just got you. And I said, no, like I'm the same guy. I still love you, I still love what I'm doing, I just don't quite believe in the trajectory of the church. I don't really think it's the right place. And again, like that really tugged at the heartstrings. It was so hard to see her so upset.
Some people keep in touch regularly, others don't. Some people will never see their parents again. Some people will never see their siblings again, or hear from them, or know they got married, or know they had a child. I wasn't even told about one of my family members passing until months later. The funeral had long since happened. I had always asked to have been informed, but I wasn't.
But I remember, running into my grandma at the bank, and she wouldn't talk to me. So in a way, it's as though some of these people are still alive, but it's as though they've already died. And I mean, my grandma actually died last year, and I went down to Invercargill and saw her at the hospice the week before she died. But I was in that strange position of, it felt to me like she'd already died 8 years ago.
The person isn't dead, they're still there. They didn't go in the coffin, they didn't go in the ground, but you can't really contact them anymore.
The first thing I realised when I left home was I had no reference points. I spoke to my father, who said that he would make some inquiries as to whether people I'd previously worked for would do a reference for me. The first response I got back was a no.
The exclusive brethren have a way of life that potentially you could argue impacts someone for either the remainder of their life, or it can set them up perhaps in a negative sense if they choose to leave that perspective. It's a real challenge because there's some sort of beautiful simplicities with living life like the brethren, but then the flip side is then that you're not ready for the real world.
Me and another girl we're good friends with another couple he's ex-brethren as well, and like it's really good me connecting with her because we sort of deal with similar stuff within the relationship, and similar thought patterns and behaviours might come up, and it's really good to have her to bounce off and go, oh my gosh, he's just done this, and she's like, oh, I've totally had that. Or oh, that'll be, I remember they were talking about this sort of thing happened, and you're like, oh, okay. It's almost like the partners of the ex-brethren need to build their own support network too.
People should be free to practice whatever religion they choose, so long as that doesn't affect the personal rights and freedoms of other people. And I think that human rights and freedoms should always trump religious freedoms.
Sorry, I just wanted, when she was talking about the wives having each other, having this similar...
I was going to ask you if that's been something that you've looked for in talking with other people that have married someone from the FLDS.
I don't know. I feel like you had been pretty well adjusted by the time that we got married. You had been out long enough. And when you served your mission in Chile, I think you had a lot of experiences that had gotten you out of that place. But I will say that I've definitely talked to a lot of people that have left since, like, after we've been married, and kind of, even if they're not like in relationships with people who have left, trying to just create compassion and explain some of those things, whether it's explaining some worldly things to people who have left, you know, to girls, and explaining how dating should look like and how a man should treat you with respect and equality and those type of things. I think it's good for just people in general too. I think one of the reasons that I enjoy doing YouTube is to help people feel compassion. And, you know, you're not always going to know whether or not someone's left the FLDS. Sometimes you will, because they have a similar accent. But, you know, understanding where people come from, no matter what their background is helpful in being patient, being kind, understanding that they might not get certain references. I think, you know, I don't know if I necessarily was like looking for camaraderie in that way, but I think I definitely like went into our relationship being mindful of not assuming that you know certain things, if that makes sense. So, and trying hard to make sure that I never made it sound like it was because of your intelligence, if that makes sense. So I think it's super important that in situations where people leave like this, like Sam is a super intelligent person, and things that he doesn't know that other people know, it's not because of intelligence, it's because of lack of opportunity. And I think that's something that I try to tell all people dealing with anybody who's leaving the FLDS, like recognize and give those opportunities to learn, and don't make them feel less than for not knowing something that you might have learned in second grade. You know, they didn't have schooling or they didn't have those opportunities to learn. And all that matters is if they're willing to learn them now and be receptive. And even when we were dating, that was one thing that I found hugely attractive in you, is I remember thinking, yeah, there's a lot of basic knowledge things that you might have never heard of, but I loved that you wanted to. You wanted to learn all the things. And so I just thought that was super cool, because you can't help your opportunity, but you can help your willingness to learn. Yeah.
Well, thank you. And I've always felt that from you, that you've never been, I guess, judged me for, because there's been things that I would come up and I'm like, man, I can't believe I didn't know that. And I've never felt like you looked at me like, yeah, I can't believe you didn't know that either. That you've always understood that, yes, you know what, it's perfectly fine. The fact that you are wanting to know that and wanting to learn that is what matters now. And I've always been a very curious person, so I enjoy learning new things, which I think did help me to some extent when I first left. Well, you met me when I first left at age 18, and geez, I was still trying to figure out everything at that point. So,
poor guy, he was trying really hard.
Yeah, I was trying so hard that it came across as that I was, like I said earlier, that I was almost cocky, like I was pretending to know everything. And so anyway, it took a few years to humble myself enough to realize, you know what, I don't know everything. I have to learn to say I don't know, and that's been a huge blessing in my life, to just be able to say, oh, I don't know, and then learn. And because I am willing to say I don't know, I'm able to find the answers to those things to learn.
Yeah, and there's some things that I almost think are more fun to get to like experience for the first time with you, and like watch you experience for the first time. I don't know, like there's certain things where I'm like, I'm kind of glad you didn't have that growing up, because now I get to show you this or do that. Or there's things that you do with our kids that you didn't get to experience. Or recently, like Sam and our little boy have been doing Super Mario, right? And I played that as like a little kid. But it doesn't matter. It's so cute though, because you and your son have this thing where you're like learning and figuring it out together. And I don't know, as your wife, like I love that. I think it's adorable. And I think it's almost more fun that you're not this guy that just already knew all the video games, but like you're figuring it out with him and doing it. And it's like that special bonding experience.
Yeah. Until our son, Landon, that's now 5 years old, just turned 5, until he started getting into wanting to play Mario and that, I had no interest because I just wasn't raised with it. So it's funny now. Just yesterday I was playing with him and I was trying to do a level, and and he's like, no, Dad, you can't do that. You got to jump down there and hit up that block so that. And I'm just like, oh, okay. What do I do? And he's 5 years old teaching me how to play Mario. So anyway, it's fun. It's fun. But
Yeah.
he's better than I am at it already.
But it's fun. I think there's certain experiences though that are cool for you to get to continue to like learn and engage with our children over.
Yes, I agree.
I've also found the world to be much more interesting, much more entertaining, and much more friendly than I ever thought possible. The caring nature of the average person is much more than I would have ever have thought. Life's beautiful, and life's there for you to take advantage of it. This is your chance at life, not your chance at life to be told how life should be done, when in fact that's not the way it should be done.
I'm not here converting people to leave, but I'm here if you want to ask questions.
Does the pain ever really go away? And the conclusion was that we didn't think it ever would. It just becomes something that you manage and something that you deal with.
One of the saddest things is that his parents don't get to see what an amazing job they did at raising him, and that transition from a young man into a father, and just what a fantastic job he's done of that. Like, I get comments all the time from my friends just watching him with little Mason and with my boys is just amazing. He's just absolutely a natural. I think they'd be super proud of him, and not even just that, like just what he's done with his career and his life. I think they'd be really proud of him, and I'm really proud of him, and it would be awesome to share that with someone else who loves him.
Oh, that makes me tear
Oh
up.
boy, you weren't supposed to pause it right there.
I know, because we're so close. But I have to. Oh, man, yeah. You can cut this out. Yeah, that like is exactly how I feel. That's probably like the hardest part of you leaving is like you said, where we don't have a relationship with your mother, and our kids don't get to have a relationship with their grandmother. But the hardest part is like knowing what an incredible husband and father and man you are, and that those people in your family can't see it for can't see you for who you are. And that's hard as a spouse, because you just want to be like, can't you see? But yeah, so anyway, I really relate with her, because that is something that is hard. None of the other things about you being from there are hard. Like, everything is amazing because of the person you are, but watching you not be appreciated for the person that you are is hard.
Well, I feel very appreciated by you, and so thank you, though, babe. But yes, it is hard. I wish that I had a relationship and that with my parents, and that they could see, like you said, that I don't take for granted what they gave me. I guess that's all.
As much or more than I do.
I count myself happy now. I am not having that pressure to conform to something that I'm not. And actually being who Vaughan really is the happiest thing that I could do.
Okay, we'll cut it there, because I think they're just showing, each person being successful and happy in their life. And I think kind of what we just barely were saying, like, it's so true, and it's sad when people leave these high demand groups and feel like their family members will never believe them that they're happy and successful and doing good things in the world and being good people. And that's one of the hardest things when you leave high demand groups.
Yeah, it is very tough, but it's so good to see like these people here on this documentary, that they have made a good life for themselves, that they're happy, and I think that is something that we all need to remember, that though we are in or come from different backgrounds, different ways of life, that there is so much opportunity to be happy and to make a good life for yourself outside of those groups as well. And for those that are listening that maybe feel trapped in some kind of religious group or any kind of situation that you don't feel comfortable, that you don't feel like you want to be a part of, just remember that there are kind people in this world that will do anything they can to help you because they are just good people. They're just good people.
Yeah. And yeah, I feel like every time we find a group like this, it just is a reminder that there's a lot more people who are similar.
Yes.
And that there's so many similarities between so many different groups and the human experience. So
yeah,
it's glad to see these people, getting to be their true selves and being able to get out those situations. So
yeah, very interesting to see all the comparisons here. Wow.
Yeah, this was a lot.
Way
very
over
similar.
On the other side of the world, and they have just very similar beliefs. It makes you wonder if people get their ideas in these different religious groups on how to do things based on things they've seen, or if people just come to the same conclusion that want to be in a very fundamentalist lifestyle within Christianity. It's very interesting. And I know that the Mormonism Christianity is very different from other Christianity. I do realize that, but even still, the FLDS coming from fundamentalist Mormon, and then way over on the other side of the world that has nothing to do with Mormonism at all, still have so many of the similar types of life. So
yeah, if you want to hear more of what it was like for Sam to grow up in polygamy, then please like and subscribe.
Yes, thank you all so much, and we'll talk to you soon.
Talk to y'all soon.